Playstore are one of the few indie devs on mobile whose main focus has always been on porting quality indie games to mobile. And almost every time they've nailed it out of the park. Every game they've put out on mobile, from Dead Cells to Cultist Simulator, Everland 1 and 2, Dungeon of the Endless and more, they've managed to deliver in terms of quality. So it's no wonder that .emu chose them to handle the Streets of Rage 4 ports for mobile, and for the most part, this is an almost perfect port of a great game. Graphically, Streets of Rage 4, which I'll now proceed to call Rage 4, is arguably one of the best looking games on mobile, at least to my eyes. And what .emu have been able to achieve with a 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up graphically is something to be lauded and applauded. Rage 4 is so visually stunning, so colorfully eye-popping, that it's one of the few games that finally made me appreciate having an OLED screen on my Poco F3, something neither Apex Legends or Diablo Immortal have been able to make me feel, even though those are both good looking games. They just feel like they'd be good looking on an LCD display too. Not Rage 4, with all its deep reds, yellows and blues, its neon street lights, its cartoony presentation. Guys, what I'm trying to say is, if you have any phone with an OLED display and you're looking for a game to make you go wow, colors, Rage 4 is the game for you. But it's not just the eye-popping visuals that make Rage 4 stand out. It's also the attention to details in its different levels. The graffiti on the walls, the potholes on streets, broken tiles, the office space in the police station, the steamy sauna, and more, all somehow helping to sell this feeling that this is a lived-in world, even though it's a cartoony world with over-the-top super-powered characters. But they also add to the beauty of Rage 4's world and levels. And I think the biggest praise I can give to Rage 4's level design and beauty is that I've never seen a ray traced game in my life, but seeing the neon signs light up the streets as I fought enemies with our reflections in the puddles of water scattered around kind of helped me understand the hype and has made me even more hyped to one day witness some of the best ray traced games out there, like Cyberpunk 2077. And all these colorful designs extend to characters also, from the 8 main characters whose design can be changed to your liking, who are all animated to feel and play uniquely, to the many different enemy types, all with different designs of different types and carrying around different auras about them, from the street thugs with their cool swag and style, to the police chief with his overwhelming presence, and more enemies with different designs, takes and moves, all adding to the wonderful atmosphere of Rage 4. .emu and Playstore didn't stop there though. There's also the option to use retro and retro CRT post-processing effect, but on an AMOLED screen the CRT effect looked better to my eyes. And for the old school fans, there were times when the game would switch to old school graphics by itself, so I couldn't find any way to make it permanent. Not that personally I'd want to, with the modern visuals looking so stunning, and Streets of Rage 1 and 2 also on Android for those who want those classic games with the classic looks. The same can also be done for music, where you can go with music designed for Rage 4 or use a retro soundtrack. But I honestly just preferred the modern soundtrack and stuck with it for the most of my 9-hour playthrough. And the music was enjoyable, nothing to complain about. If I do have anything to complain about in terms of presentation, it's that for whatever reason, Rage 4 doesn't scale to a 2:1-ish aspect ratio, so it's kind of boxed in with the game artwork used to fill out the rest of the screen. I don't know if it was done for technical reasons or to preserve the mood of the game, but it was for me a minor annoyance when taking into account all Rage 4 offers visually. The first thing I want to focus on in terms of gameplay is controls. And for touch controls, it took me about 5 minutes with them before I decided it was a no for me and I moved over to using my Pega. Touch controls can be remapped, resized and repositioned however you like though. So if it's your only option, you can at least play a little with it to find a setup that fits your playstyle. As for gamepads, they work almost perfectly. Rage 4 recognized both my PS4 and my Pega controllers, And there's even an option for using PS4 or Xbox style button layouts, something I find is becoming more common on games with gamepad support. My only problem is there's no rumble support for the PS4 controller and no option to use my phone's own vibration motor, and I hope Play just add support for one or both of these vibration options in the future. The great thing .emu have managed to achieve with Rage 4 is bringing that classic arcade experience to new fans while finding a way to appease older Streets of Rage fans. Story and arcade mode are essentially the same, except arcade mode is more of a classic in that losing all health means starting the entire game all over from the first level. And story mode, which is for the more faint of heart like me, is far less punishing and better suited to modern gamers who weren't used to going to arcades back in the days. But that's not to say story mode can't be a punishing experience in itself. Dying at any point in a level takes you back to the beginning of that level, which was a little infuriating, especially at boss fight, but is also part of the challenge built into the game. But story mode also adds in assists, for instance extra lives, that come at the expense of the final level score and leaderboard rankings. Then there's boss rush mode, which as the name implies has you fighting all the bosses over again. And then my favorite, survivor mode, where you fight short waves of enemies, get perks at the end of each wave, with boss fights thrown in every now and then. But survivor mode also adds in new arenas not in the main story, and for my 9+ hours with Rage 4, it also seems like it's the only way to unlock alternate movesets for the main characters. All this is just to say that Rage 4, despite feeling like a short game on the surface, offers many hours of enjoyment past the main story mode, which in itself already offers various difficulties from easy to maniac plus, score ratings, and leaderboards, leaving you to chase a perfect rating for each level. Arcade mode, which is story mode in classic Street of Rage style, where it's a limited amount of lives for the entire game and death means starting over from the very beginning of the game again. Add survivor mode with its endless waves of enemies. Then boss rush and training mode for perfecting combat and individual combos. Means you could play Rage 4 for 7+ hours and have a good time and be done, or you can play for 30+ hours. It offers something for almost everybody in love or interested in beat 'em ups. As for combat, if you're expecting a fast-paced brawler similar to games like Dead Cells, then you'd be in for a big surprise as I was. Rage 4 is actually more tactical than it looks, with the positioning of main characters relative to enemy attacks, and understanding of the surroundings, weapons you can use or enemies currently have in their possessions, the enemy types faced, all more important than fast or twitch reflex most of the times. Mixing the fact that all 8 different characters, from older versions of returning characters like Axel, Max, Blaze, to new characters like Cherry, all have different strengths, speed, and even various combos that can be mastered through the training mode, which will be very important for those chasing perfect scores or trying to beat Rage 4 at its hardest difficulty. In line with Rage 4 being a tactical brawler, special abilities which can also give immunity to attacks actually drain health and can only be replenished by hitting enemies before they hit you, instead of a simple generic parry button. So it serves as a risk reward system where you can get hits on a lot of enemies, dodge a dangerous attack, or get the final attack in a boss fight. But it also leaves your character extremely vulnerable, as any hit taken will take all the health bars temporarily reduced by activating your specials. It took me a bit of time to get used to Rage 4's combat, but I'm mostly stuck to using fast-paced characters like Cherry, who can actually run, or Shiva, who hits really hard but can't hold on to any weapons. And I'd still like to go back in and master most of the other characters, maybe this time at the difficulty more in line with my skill level like normal, rather than hard, which I played on. Because the enemies really hit hard, and there's a nice variety of them always attacking at the same time. From cops with shields looking like they're from a RoboCop timeline, to enemies that will headbutt and drop kick me, to enemies using different weapons, enemies that grapple, to boss fights with their own special attacks, and more, helping to make Rage 4 a challenging game, even though I was only playing on its 3rd hardest difficulty, with 3 more difficulties after that. Even the environments and levels play a crucial part in Rage 4's combat. From having things like hot steams, volcanic eruptions, exposed wires, or the sonar with its slippery floors, and all this affecting both the players and enemies. So if you play it right, you can take out enemies by taking advantage of the environmental situations each level presents and reduce the enemies to be faced. But if played wrong, would just lead to being overwhelmed by both enemies and the environment. The only thing I'd say is missing from Rage 4 gameplay wise right now is co-op. And I know from recent history with Dead Cells that play digits are quite good with updates, so hopefully they keep up with that track record. All of Rage 4's combat is held together by slick animations that just flow at 60 FPS, and Play Digits have done a good job of keeping it at what felt like a steady frame rate for most of the time I spent with the game. My only minor complaint is of the Oliver Twist variant of wanting more. I'd like to have the option for at least 90 FPS, because even with all its max graphic settings turned on, my Poco F3 never really got warm, so I assume there's a bit of headroom there. As for bugs, I've faced none so far, no crashes or getting stuck in the environment or anything of that sort. 10 out of 10 in that aspect. As for the story, I'm covering it last in terms of things I want to touch on in relation to reviewing Streets of Rage 4, because it was basically the worst part of Rage 4. The story is told in comic book style panels, and to be honest, none of it really made sense or felt cohesive in any sense to me, and I guess this wasn't the main focus in developing the game. So with all that said, these are my pros and cons from having played through Rage 4. It's arguably the most beautiful game I've seen on mobile this year, even in comparison to games like Diablo Immortal. It's also got something for everyone, from modern fans to fans of classic arcade Streets of Rage games. There's also lots of replayability through score chasing, leaderboards, boss rush mode, survivor mode, arcade and story mode, and varying difficulty levels. And all of this with nice and smooth animations at a steady 60 FPS. Rage 4 also has deep settings menu for customizing everything from touch controls to graphic settings and post-processing effects. And it also has full controller support, which might not sound like much, but it's something the likes of EA and Activision have failed to get right on mobile. As for my cons, there aren't too many, but one of them is the game can't stretch to an 18:9 aspect ratio, and the story and plot is kind of nonsensical to me. So overall, I fully recommend Streets of Rage 4 on Android to fans of arcade beat 'em ups, or to anyone looking for a game to show off their beautiful OLED displays with, and anyone looking for a fun premium game with full controller support on mobile. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tired out.